Hey everyone, this is Riley Hill from SlatePad. It's the end of 2023 and you're going to see a lot of Apple report cards and reviews of the year, which is fine. What I would like to do instead is go over my hopes and I guess dreams for iPad and iPadOS in 2024. I've distilled this down into 4 things that I would like to see come next year across hardware and software. But before we get started, you know the drill. Make sure to like and subscribe, it really helps out the channel. And with that, let's go ahead and get started with number 1. New hardware. That's an easy one, right? 2023 was the first year since the iPad launched that we didn't get any new iPad hardware. Unless you count that Apple Pencil, which I really don't, but it's a bummer, right? There's no way around it. You could argue the iPad didn't need a hardware update because the hardware was so far ahead of the software, which hasn't been true for a while. But it's still a bummer. You like to see these things get updated. No one wants to spend hundreds of dollars on a computer that's already out of date. If you've been following the rumors though, you know that 2024 is looking like the year where every iPad either gets refreshed or totally redesigned. In the case of the iPad Pro, we're looking at a total redesign. And the hallmark feature, of course, is an OLED display. We know the benefits of that: deeper blacks, higher contrast. We also know, based on past patterns, the iPad Pro is going to end up getting the M3 chip. But beyond that, we really don't know anything about this update. There are a few things I'm hoping to see. One would be a relocation of the FaceTime camera from the portrait end to the landscape end of the device. I'm assuming this didn't happen last year because they didn't have time to figure out how to account for the Apple Pencil charging hardware that's along the landscape side of the iPad Pro today. But Apple hires a lot of smart people, so I am sure they're able to figure this one out. Samsung was able to figure out a solution, I'm sure they will as well. Now, another thing I'd like to see, which is admittedly more of a long shot, is an additional USB port. When the iPad Pro added a USB port in 2018, it opened up a whole new world of accessories. And iPadOS has continued to evolve so that it's able to work with more USB accessories. Remember, that 2018 iPad originally didn't even work with a USB thumb drive. So we're at the point, as we're getting into more advanced workflows, that it would be great to have a second USB port. If for no other reason, then if you're not using the Magic Keyboard, you also need that port for charging. A second USB-C port would help that a bunch. There are rumors of a new 12.9-inch iPad Pro, and that kind of goes into Apple's more recent strategy of bigger but cheaper devices. This is the strategy that's brought us the iPhone Plus and the 15-inch MacBook Air. Of course, we don't have any real numbers, but based on rumors and what we can infer from Apple's earnings, this strategy has seen mixed results. On the iPhone side, especially with the iPhone 15 Plus, it seems to have been more of a success. But on the Mac side, that 15-inch MacBook Air hasn't really moved the needle in terms of the recent sales decline in Mac devices. I would anticipate that this 12.9-inch iPad Air, which will basically be a larger device without ProMotion, with 2 speakers, a bigger version of the current iPad Air. I don't anticipate that's going to move the needle much for iPad as well, but I am never one to complain about more choice. It's great that customers will now have an option if they want to have a larger iPad without having to spend $1,200. For the standard iPad, which just got a refresh last year, and the iPad mini, the only things that are rumored are spec bumps, i.e. new chips. That's great. Neither of those is really in dire need of a hardware redesign, although I will continue to wish and hope that one day they rebalance the iPad line as a whole and put that standard iPad on an M1 chip. The baseline for iPad should be an M1. They should all be that capable and then go up from there. Super unlikely, but that's something I would love to see. Slide over only apps. So to level set, in case you're not aware, Slide Over is a standard multitasking feature on iPadOS. It allows you to slide over a small window of an app to access information or perform a quick action while you're working in another app or in a split view. One of the things that makes the iPad so easy to use for normal people is that when you tap on an app icon, it opens full screen, right? It's very straightforward. The problem is, not every app needs to be full screen. I mean, kind of thinking of something. It's on the tip of my tongue. God, what is it? I don't know. I'm sure it'll come to me. But there are classes of apps that would benefit from not having to be full screen. And if there was a way that apps could declare they were slide over only and only open in that slide over stack, I think that would be great for things like social media apps and messaging apps that really don't need to be full screen. There are some UI issues to overcome here, right? Right now you can't access the slide over stack from the home screen, but it's something I'm sure Apple could figure out, and it would be a great iPadOS 18 feature. 2023 and iPadOS 17 brought us a couple nice improvements for Stage Manager. The main one would be more flexibility in where you position your windows in a stage. The second one kind of went under the radar, and I don't know if it's specifically Stage Manager, but I think it was in iPadOS 17.1. Apple added the ability to change your audio output when you're connected to a monitor or a Thunderbolt dock. So I feel like Stage Manager's in a pretty good place, and I hope they continue to iterate on it. In that spirit, there's a couple things I think they could add this year that would be really transformative. The big thing for me would be the elimination of the 4-app limit on external displays. The way it works today is that on either display, you can have 4 windows open in a stage at a time. And when you open the 5th window, the oldest app in that stage gets kicked out into its own stage, which you could argue on the built-in display makes some kind of sense. Windows on iPadOS are bigger than they are on a desktop OS, so it kind of makes a little bit of sense to have a 4-window limit on the built-in display. Even on the 12.9-inch, room is kind of tight. But on an external monitor, say a 27-inch 4K monitor, you have a ton of space, and that 4-window limit really doesn't make sense there. And then on top of that, that 4-window limit should be a 4-app limit. What I mean by that is, a common scenario I have is, I'll have the Notes app open, and then I want to pull out individual notes into their own windows. Well, all those Notes windows count against the window limit. So instead of being able to have 4 apps open with however many windows they have, it's really just 4 windows from any app. If they want to keep the 4-app limit, at least let me open as many windows from one of those 4 apps as I want. Eliminating that limit altogether on an external display makes sense, because if you're technical enough to know how to connect a monitor to your iPad and get Stage Manager working, I think you're probably technical enough to manage your own windows. So I would love it if iPadOS 18 removed this limit altogether on the external display. From a software perspective, iPadOS has actually had a pretty good year. The highlight, of course, would be Apple bringing Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro to iPadOS in May, but we've also had more updates for the Pro apps that are on iPadOS, and new apps have come, like Procreate Dreams, which came last month. If you know of any other Pro apps that have come to iPadOS in the last year that I'm not thinking of, make sure and drop a comment. I'd love to see this stuff and keep track of it and possibly review it. I'd also like to see iPadOS 18 specifically continue to add APIs that let developers bring more Pro apps to iPadOS. Like in iPadOS 16, we got desktop class apps, which gave you some of the different adornments that Mac apps have, and Virtual Memory Swap allows apps to address up to 16 gigs of memory if they need it by utilizing the RAM in the device as well as some of the available storage. And that is my list of hopes for what we'll see for iPad and iPadOS in 2024. I'd love to know what things you guys want to see from iPad next year, so drop a comment, let's start a conversation. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you so much, and thank you for your support. Please like and subscribe on your way out. It really helps the channel to grow, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.